Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Tech Tactics here, and this is going to be part 2 of my 2014 Holiday Buyer's Guide. And this buyer's guide is going to be how to build a computer for under $500. So I feel like that's a pretty reasonable price range when looking for a gaming computer. Although it's not very high end, you will see some decent quality parts in this build log that I have set up. So hopefully you guys enjoy this video, and I'll see you guys in just a second to go over what the parts are that I chose. Alright, and we're back. So now that we are doing my $500 build, we're actually going to be possibly gaming on this computer. This computer is not going to be too bad in terms of performance, and it actually has some pretty decent parts. So with that said, let's jump right on in. Now this computer features an AMD FX 6300 CPU. This is a 6-core at 3.5 GHz at a very, very fair price in my opinion. I actually have the same CPU in my current computer, and I can say it actually performs very well. At only $90 on sale, it does perform very, very well, and that's why I decided to spend maybe a little bit more than getting an AMD Athlon or Intel Pentium. Why am I pronouncing that incorrectly? Anyway, FX 6300, great CPU, and now for the motherboard, I went with a Gigabyte GA970A UD3P. Sorry, I had to read that off the screen because honestly that is a ridiculous name. However, this motherboard is going to provide us with everything we need for this computer. This motherboard is quite cheap actually, but it still is going to perform just as well as we need it to. This motherboard is an AM3 Plus, the same socket the FX63 uses, and it's an AMD 970. It should be a decent overclocker, not great as it is still on the cheap side, but it should be pretty good. And it has 4 RAM slots, so you can have up to 32 gigs of RAM, that being 8, so 4 8 gigs. However, we are not using 32 gigs of RAM in this build, as that would have been almost our entire budget just in RAM. So it can support many different speeds, 1600, 1866, and it can overclock past that. It does have crossfire support. It does not have SLI though. And it has SATA 6 gigabit per second, and it has USB 3 headers, so it has basically everything we're going to need for this computer at a good price. So now, what I forgot to mention is we are actually going to be doing a heatsink for this computer. In my $300 one, we stuck with the stock Intel heatsink, but since this is an unlocked CPU, we might as well try and take and overclock it and get the most amount of performance we possibly can out of it. So that's why I chose the Cooler Master H212 Evo, and that is a great heatsink at a very cheap price. It's arguably the hardest heatsink to beat in terms of price to performance, and it is not liquid cooling. So any of you guys out there that's a little nervous to go liquid cooling, this is going to be a great heatsink for you at a low price. In terms of RAM, we went with the G.Skill Aries RAM, and this is going to be 2 4 gigs for a total of 8 gigs. Now 8 gigs is probably the perfect amount for gaming this year. I will say by next year, I personally, this is not any sort of fact, but I personally predict that we'll be using past 8 gigs of RAM for gaming by then. However, for now, 8 gigs is perfectly enough. And if you ever need the extra 8 gigs or 4 gigs, you can just throw in RAM. It's extremely easy. And this is actually quite fast of RAM, or not. It's 1866 megahertz, so that's actually pretty good. Most or cheaper RAM is 1333 or 1600, and for this price range, I was surprised to be able to find some RAM at 1866 megahertz. As for the hard drive, we're actually going to go with the same 1TB Western Digital Blue that I have in my gaming computer and that I put in the $300 list. Now, the reason why I kept this is because honestly, in this budget, we don't have much room for anything other than the best CPU and the best GPU that we can possibly get. So I went with the cheapest hard drive to have a little bit extra money to spend on the 2 most important things. 1 terabyte should definitely be enough to hold all your games for quite some time to come, and if it's not, it's super easy to throw in another hard drive too. So, for the graphics card, arguably one of the most important parts and definitely the most expensive part, we decided to go with the MSI R9 270X. Sorry, making sure it was the X. It is the X. And this graphics card is extremely hard to beat. Very, very cheap, very good performance. I have just the next step up as the R9 280, and that performs quite well. So I can expect the 270X to perform well. And from seeing benchmarks from Jay's 2 cents, if you guys haven't seen his video, he highly recommends this GPU as well. And I honestly don't think there's a GPU right now that can beat it at this price point. It's extremely cheap, especially since AMD has recently been cutting all their prices on their graphics cards in order to be able to stay competitive with NVIDIA's new GPU series. So, for the case, we're doing the Corsair Graphite Series 230T. This is a pretty basic case, but it does look pretty nice, and it's made by a good brand, and it's definitely going to be sturdy, and it's going to hold everything we need it to, for now and for later, as it does have plenty of room for upgrading, and it's at a very, very cheap price. That's part of the reason why I went with it. And it has some LEDs and stuff, and it looks pretty nice in my opinion. However, the case is a lot of the times just personal preference, so you can substitute this case with any other case that fits your budget. As for the power supply, the last part of this build, we're using the same one that I went with in the $300 build, the Corsair CX600M. The 600M is so cheap right now, guys. It's a little more than 30 bucks, as you can see, and it's so cheap, honestly. But this is 600 watts, gonna be plenty for now, and hopefully enough for later. If you do plan on going SLI or Crossfire, I might recommend getting at least 750. But 600 should be able to handle that too. It is 80 plus bronze certified, so it's very trustworthy, and it should save you a little bit of money on your electric bill if you guys have to pay for that. And it is semi-modular. It says the 600M, the M is for modular. However, owning a 750M, I know it's only semi-modular. It's a little confusing how Corsair named their power supplies like this, but it's still semi-modular, so you should be able to make those cables look pretty nice and tidy. So, with that said, that's actually about it for this computer. Obviously, you guys can change whatever you feel you need to stay within your budget, but for $500, this is a computer that I would personally go with. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and if you found it informative in any way, please be sure to leave a like, and if you're interested in the rest of the series or any of my other awesome videos, definitely don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.